My name is Ethan Carter, and for a long time I believed love was something people exaggerated in movies. You know the kind, where two people fight the world just to be together, where destiny somehow pulls them back no matter how far apart they go. I used to believe in that. Not anymore. Life has a funny way of beating the romance out of you. Mine did it slowly, one quiet disappointment at a time. By the time I turned 30, my world had become simple and predictable. Wake up, go to work, come home, heat up something frozen for dinner, watch whatever mindless show happened to be on, sleep, repeat. Most people would probably call that lonely. I called it peaceful, because peace meant no surprises, no heartbreak, no memories sneaking up on you in the middle of the night, and most importantly, no Lena. For years, I'd trained myself not to think about her, but that night, the universe apparently had other plans. It was close to midnight when the knocking started. Not a polite knock either. It was urgent, desperate. 3 quick bangs against the door that echoed through my small apartment. I frowned and glanced at the clock on the wall. 11:47 p.m. Nobody ever came to my place this late. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined it. Maybe it was the wind, a branch hitting the building. Then it came again. Bang, bang, bang. I stood up from the couch slowly, my heart beating just a little. Faster! All right, I muttered under my breath. As I walked toward the door, rain hammered against the windows. A storm had rolled in earlier that evening, the kind that made the whole city feel darker and quieter than usual. Whoever was out there had to be soaked. I reached the door and hesitated. Something about the knocking felt frantic. Still, curiosity won. I unlocked the door and pulled it open. And the moment I saw her, the air left my lungs. Lena Matthews stood on the other side. Her dark hair clung to her face, completely drenched from the rain. Her sweater was soaked through, and water dripped from the sleeves onto the floor. But that wasn't what stunned me. She was crying. Not the quiet kind of crying people try to hide. No, her shoulders trembled as if she'd been holding it in for hours. Her eyes were red and swollen, and tears mixed with rain as they ran down her cheeks. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The last time I had seen Lena was 8 years ago. 8 years since she walked out of my life without explanation. 8 years since she disappeared like someone had erased her from existence. And now she was standing at my door in the middle of the night. My brain struggled to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. "Ethan," she whispered. Hearing my name in her voice again felt like someone had reached into my chest and twisted something old and buried. I forced myself to stay still. "What are you doing here?" I asked. The words came out colder than I expected. Lena swallowed hard, glancing over her shoulder at the dark street behind her, as if she were afraid someone might be there. "Please," she said quietly. I didn't know where else to go. The rain poured harder, splashing against the pavement. Part of me wanted to slam the door. 8 years. 8 years of silence. No messages, no explanations, nothing. And now she shows up like this? But another part of me, the part that still remembered late-night conversations and lazy Sunday mornings, refused to move. I sighed and stepped aside. "Come in before you catch pneumonia." She hesitated, like she didn't believe I meant it. Then she stepped inside. Water pooled beneath her shoes as she stood awkwardly near the entrance. The familiar scent of rain and cold air filled the room. I grabbed a towel from the bathroom and tossed it toward her. "Here." "Thank you," she murmured. She wrapped it around her shoulders, but her hands were still shaking. I leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing my arms as I studied her. She looked different. Older, obviously. Life had a way of doing that. But there was something else, too. A weight behind her eyes that hadn't been there before. For years, I'd imagined this moment. Not exactly like this, of course. In my imagination, I always had the perfect speech ready, the right words to demand answers. Now that she was actually here, everything felt strangely quiet. Lena kept her gaze lowered, twisting the edge of the towel between her fingers. Finally, I broke the silence. "So," I said slowly, "you disappear for almost a decade. And then show up at my door at midnight." She flinched slightly. "That's about right," I continued. "Care to explain?" She didn't answer right away. The only sound in the apartment was the storm outside and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then she looked up at me, and the pain in her eyes caught me off guard. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Something inside me snapped. "Sorry?" I repeated. "That's it?" My voice rose despite my effort to stay calm. "You vanished, Lena. No goodbye, no phone call, nothing. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" Her lips trembled. "I know," she said, quietly. "No, you don't." For a moment, it looked like she might start crying again. But instead, she took a shaky breath. "I never stopped thinking about you," she said. I let out a short, bitter laugh. "That's funny, because it sure felt like you forgot I existed." She closed her eyes briefly, like the words hurt. Then she looked back at me. "There's a reason I left," she said. "Yeah?" I replied. "I'd love to hear it." Another long silence passed. Lena stared down at the floor, gathering courage. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because if I stayed, it would have destroyed your life." The words hung in the air between us. My brow furrowed. What does that even mean? She opened her mouth to answer, but stopped. Fear flashed across her face. Real fear. And suddenly I realized something I hadn't noticed before. She wasn't just sad, she was terrified. "Lena," I said, slowly, "what's going on?" Her eyes filled with tears again. "There's something you deserve to know," she said. I waited. My heart began beating faster without warning. She looked at me like she was about to drop a truth that had been buried for years. And when she finally spoke, the world as I knew it started to shift. "8 years ago," she whispered, "when I disappeared." She paused, struggling to say the next words. Then she looked straight at me. "I was pregnant." The words didn't feel real when they left Lena's mouth. For a moment, I honestly thought I had misheard her. The storm outside roared louder, rain striking the windows like tiny explosions. But inside my apartment, everything went strangely quiet. Pregnant. My mind repeated the word over and over, trying to force it to make sense. "You're what?" I finally said. Her eyes dropped to the floor again, like she couldn't bear to look at me while the truth settled in. "I was pregnant," she repeated softly. 8 years ago." A cold weight settled in my chest. My thoughts raced backward, through time, trying to remember every detail of the last weeks we spent together. The nights we talked about the future, the plans we made, the promises. None of them included this. "And you didn't think to tell me?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Lena's shoulders tightened. "I wanted to." "Wanted to?" I stepped away from the counter, anger bubbling up in a way I hadn't felt in years. "Lena, that's not a small detail. That's not something you just forget to mention." Tears rolled down her cheeks again. "I didn't forget." "Then why?" I demanded. "Why disappear? Why leave me wondering for 8 years what I did wrong?" Her breathing became uneven. "You didn't do anything wrong." "Then explain it to me," I said, spreading my arms in frustration. "Because right now, none of this makes any sense." She wiped her face with the towel, trying to steady herself. "When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified," she began. "We were both still in college. We barely had money. We were still figuring out our lives. That still doesn't. Explain why you ran. I know, she whispered. She paused, staring at the floor like the memories were too heavy to lift. There was something else happening at the same time. I crossed my arms again, waiting. My dad, she continued quietly. His business had collapsed. He owed a lot of money to people. The kind of people you don't want to owe. Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. What kind of people? I asked. She hesitated. Dangerous people. The room seemed colder suddenly. Debt collectors? I guessed. Not exactly. I frowned. Lena, they weren't the kind of people who send letters or make polite phone calls, she said. They threatened him. They threatened our family. I stared at her. And that has what to do with me? Her eyes slowly lifted to meet mine. Everything. I didn't like the sound of that. One night, she said quietly, one of them showed up at our house. He was drunk and angry. He said if my dad didn't pay soon, they'd start hurting the people he cared about. A chill crept down my spine. They mentioned you, Ethan. My jaw tightened. What do you mean? They knew about you, she said. They knew I was seeing someone. They knew where you worked. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. You're saying some random criminals were watching me? She nodded faintly. They said accidents happen all the time. The weight of her words settled slowly, like a dark cloud filling the room. That's why you left, I said quietly. Yes. I shook my head, struggling to process it. You could have told me? No, she said, firmly. I looked at her in disbelief. You don't get to decide that. I wasn't trying to decide your life for you, she said, her voice cracking. I was trying to protect it. My hands clenched into fists. So your solution was to disappear without a word? If they thought I had no one, they wouldn't target you. I turned away, running a hand through my hair. 8 years. 8 years of confusion, anger, and sleepless nights. And this was the reason? I would have helped you, I said quietly. I know. Would have stayed. I know. I looked back at her, frustration burning in my chest. Then why didn't you trust me enough to let me make that choice? Her eyes filled with pain. Because I was 19 and terrified, she whispered. The honesty in her voice knocked some of the anger out of me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The storm outside finally began to calm, the rain softening against the windows. Then another thought struck me. Wait, I said slowly. My heart started pounding again. If you were pregnant. I couldn't finish the sentence. Lena understood anyway. She swallowed hard. I couldn't keep the baby. The words landed like a punch to the gut. What? I tried, she said quickly. I really did. But I was alone, Ethan. I had no money, no support, and people were threatening my family. My mind felt like it was spinning. So what happened? Her fingers twisted together again. I carried the pregnancy to term, she said softly. The air seemed to leave the room, and then I gave the baby up for adoption. For several seconds, I just stared at her. Somewhere deep inside my chest, something cracked open. A child. My child. Out there somewhere in the world, living a life I knew nothing about. You're telling me, I said slowly, that I have a kid, and I'm just hearing about it now? Her voice trembled. I didn't want to ruin your life by dragging you into mine. I laughed bitterly. Well, congratulations, I muttered. You ruined it anyway. She flinched at that. Silence filled the room again. My brain tried to imagine a child with my eyes, my smile, my laugh, 8 years old, 8 years of birthdays, first steps, first words. All of it gone. I sank down into the chair by the table, suddenly feeling exhausted. "Why are you here now?" I asked quietly. She looked at me like she'd been dreading that question the most. "I didn't come for forgiveness." "Good," I said, "because I'm not ready to give it." She nodded slowly. "I came because something happened." My eyes narrowed. "What kind of something?" Her hands trembled again. "The adoptive parents contacted me 2 weeks ago." I sat up straighter. "They—" "What?" "They said our child has started asking questions." My pulse quickened. "Questions about what?" "About where he came from." My chest tightened. "And?" She took a slow breath before answering. "He wants to meet his biological father." The words hit me like thunder. I stared at her, unable to speak. Then she delivered the part that changed everything. "They said the meeting can only happen if both of us agree." For a long time after Lena spoke, I couldn't say a single word. The sentence kept replaying in my head like a broken recording. He wants to meet his biological father, 8 years. Somewhere out there was a kid who had my blood, my DNA, my life running through his veins, and I had never even seen his face. I leaned forward, pressing my palms together as I tried to steady my breathing. "What's his name?" I asked finally. My voice sounded strange, like it belonged to someone else. Lena hesitated. "They named him Noah." Noah. The name settled into my mind slowly. I pictured a little boy with messy hair and curious eyes, running through a park somewhere, laughing without any idea who I was. "How old is he exactly?" I asked. "He turned 8 last month. 8 years old. 8 birthdays. 8 candles on a cake I wasn't there to see." A strange ache spread through my chest. "What's he like?" I asked quietly. Lena looked surprised by the question, but something softer appeared in her expression. "He's smart," she said. "Really curious about everything. His parents say he asks 100 questions a day." Despite everything, the corner of my mouth twitched slightly. "That sounds about right." She nodded faintly. "He loves drawing and building things. Apparently, he once took apart a whole alarm clock just to see how it worked." I rubbed my face slowly. That sounded exactly like something I would have done as a kid. "Do you see him?" I asked. Her expression fell again. "No." The adoption was closed. "So, how do you know all this?" She reached into her bag. "I've been getting letters." She carefully pulled out a small envelope. "I never stopped thinking about him," she said quietly. "Every year on his birthday, I wondered where he was, if he was okay." She placed something on the table between us. A photograph. My heart started pounding before I even looked at it. Slowly, I reached forward and picked it up. It showed a boy standing in what looked like a backyard. He held a small soccer ball under one arm, smiling at the camera, dark hair, bright eyes, a familiar shape to his jaw. For a moment, the world seemed to blur. He looked like me. Not exactly the same, but close enough that anyone who knew me as a kid would probably see it instantly. "That's, him," Lena whispered. My throat tightened. I stared at the photo longer than I meant to, trying to memorize every detail. The way his hair fell across his forehead, the small gap between his front teeth, the way his smile seemed a little crooked. 8 years. 8 years of a life that should have included me. A wave of anger suddenly rushed back. I dropped the photo onto the table. "You should have told me," I said. Lena didn't argue. "I know. You don't get to decide whether I'm ready to be a father." "I know. You don't get to erase someone's life like that." Her eyes filled with tears again. "I know." The quiet acceptance in her voice made it harder to stay angry. Stood up and began pacing the room. "You say you were protecting me," I continued, "but you didn't even give me a choice." She watched me silently. "I spent years thinking you stopped loving me," I said. My voice came out rougher than expected. I thought maybe I wasn't enough. Her head shook immediately. That was never true. Then why didn't you come back? I asked. The question hung in the air. For a moment she didn't answer. Then she spoke softly. Because by the time things finally calmed down, too much time had passed. That's not an excuse. I know. 8 years, Lena. I know. I stopped pacing and looked at her. There was something in her face I hadn't noticed earlier. Regret. Deep, heavy regret. I thought you'd hate me, she admitted quietly. I gave a short laugh. Well, congratulations again. You were right. But even as I said it, the anger didn't feel as strong as it had before. Maybe because now I knew the truth. Maybe because part of me could see the terrified 19-year-old girl she used to be. Lena wiped her eyes again. I never stopped loving you, Ethan. The words landed softly, but heavily. I didn't respond. I tried to move on, she continued. I really did. But every time I thought about the future, you were still there. I looked away. Hearing that stirred up emotions I'd spent years burying. You can't. Just walk back into my life and say things like that, I said quietly. I know. Things don't work like that. I know. Then why say it? Her answer came immediately. Because it's true. Silence filled the room again. The storm outside had almost completely passed now. Just the faint sound of dripping rain remained. I looked back at the photo on the table. Noah. My son. A kid who had no idea his biological father was standing in a small apartment trying to decide what to do next. When do they want to meet? I asked. Lena looked surprised again. You're considering it? I didn't say that, I replied quickly. But you asked. I sighed. When? Next month, she said. They suggested a casual meeting at a park. Nothing overwhelming. My stomach twisted. Do they know about me? They know I told you. And? They said the decision is yours. I ran a hand through my hair again. A month. 30 days to decide whether I was ready to meet the child I never knew existed. What if I say no? I asked. Lena's voice became very quiet. Then we respect that. And he just never knows? Her eyes filled with sadness. Not unless you change your mind later. I stared out the window into the dark street. My entire life had been simple yesterday. Work, home, silence. Now suddenly there was a son and a woman from my past standing in my living room. What do you want? I asked her. She hesitated. I want him to know where he came from, she said softly. That's not what I asked. She looked down again. What do you want, Lena? When she finally answered, her voice was barely above a whisper. I want a second chance. The words hung between us. I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I didn't know if second chances were something I still believed in. I didn't sleep that night. After Lena told me she wanted a second chance, neither of us really knew what to say next. The apartment felt too small for the weight of everything that had been revealed. Eventually, she fell asleep on the couch, still, wrapped in the towel I had given her earlier. I sat in the chair by the window, staring out at the quiet street. The storm had completely passed. The pavement outside reflected the orange glow of the streetlights, and the whole city looked strangely calm, like nothing extraordinary had just happened. But inside my head, everything had changed. 8 years ago, I thought the worst thing that could happen was losing Lena. I was wrong. The worst thing was losing a life I never even knew existed. Picked up the photograph from the table again. Noah, my son. Even thinking the word son felt unreal. He looked happy in the picture, confident, safe. Part of me was grateful for that. Another part of me couldn't stop imagining all the moments I'd missed. His first steps. The first time he said a word. the first day of school. All those memories belonged to someone else. I leaned back in the chair and rubbed my eyes. For years, I told myself love was just a story people like to believe in, something fragile that always ended in disappointment. But tonight had forced me to face a different possibility. Maybe love wasn't fragile. Maybe it was stubborn. Maybe it survived even when people made terrible decisions. Across the room, Lena stirred slightly on the couch. I looked over at her. Even after all these years, something about seeing her there felt familiar in a way I couldn't explain. She had changed, of course. Life had left its marks. But the person I once knew was still there beneath it all. The girl who used to laugh too loudly at dumb jokes. The girl who believed the future would somehow work itself out. I wondered how many nights she had spent wondering about Noah, wondering about me. Morning came slowly. The first pale light crept through the blinds, filling the apartment with a soft glow. Lena woke up a little after sunrise. For a moment, she looked confused, like she had forgotten where she was. Then she saw me sitting. "In the chair. Did you sleep at all?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. "Not really." She sat up slowly. "I'm sorry. You've said that a lot tonight." "I know." She looked nervous again. "So, what happens now?" That was the question, wasn't it? What happens now? I stood up and walked toward the kitchen, pouring 2 cups of coffee. When I handed one to her, she looked surprised. "Thanks." We sat across from each other at the small table. The photograph of Noah still rested between us. I thought about what you said, I began. Her fingers tightened around the coffee cup. "And?" "I'm still angry," she nodded. "You have every right to be. I missed 8 years of my son's life. I know. And I still don't know if I can forgive you for that." Her eyes dropped. "I understand." I took a slow breath. "But that's not Noah's fault." She looked up again. "What do you mean?" I glanced at the photo. "He deserves to know where he came from," I said. "Even if the story isn't perfect." Hope flickered across her face. "Are you saying I'll meet him?" For a second, she just stared at me. Then tears filled her eyes again. But this time, they were different. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet," I said. "I have no idea how to be a father." She let out a small, shaky laugh. "I don't think anyone does at first." I leaned back in my chair. "When is the meeting?" 3 weeks from now," she said. "At a park near where his family lives." I nodded slowly. 3 weeks. That was how long I had to prepare to meet the kid who had unknowingly changed my entire life. "And Lena," I added. She tensed slightly. "Yes? This doesn't mean everything between us is magically fixed." "I know," she said quickly. "You hurt me. I know. And trust doesn't just come back overnight." Her voice softened. "I understand." For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then she asked the question she'd been afraid to say out loud. "Do you think there's still a chance for us?" I thought about that carefully. 8 years ago, I would have answered immediately. Now the truth was more complicated. "I don't know," I admitted. Her expression fell slightly. "But," I continued, "last night you showed up at my door after 8 years." She listened quietly. "And somehow, even after everything, I still opened it." A faint smile touched her lips. I noticed. I shrugged. Maybe that means something. 3 weeks later, I stood in the middle of a small park, with my heart pounding harder than it ever had before. Kids ran across the grass. Parents chatted on nearby benches. The world carried on like it was just another normal afternoon. But for me, it felt like standing on the edge of an entirely new life. Lena stood beside me, just as nervous. "Are you ready?" she asked. "Not even a little," I admitted. Then I saw them walking toward us, a man and a woman, and between them, a small boy holding a soccer ball, dark hair, curious eyes. My chest tightened. "That's him," Lena whispered. The boy looked up at us with open curiosity, and in that moment I realized something important. Love isn't always neat. It doesn't always arrive at the right time. Sometimes it's messy, complicated, late. But sometimes it still finds its way back to your door, just like Lena did that night, and that knock at midnight changed everything I believed about love forever.